All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a really interesting question. How does a radical new idea actually take hold? Especially when it's going up against centuries of tradition. We're going to dig into the playbook used in two of the ancient world's most important cities, and we'll see how a tiny movement managed to survive conflict, find its people, and build something that was really made to last. And this is really the heart of the matter, isn't it? Just imagine for a second. You show up in a powerful, unfamiliar city with a message that challenges pretty much everything people believe. So where do you even start? Who can you trust? What do you do when the opposition gets intense? And maybe most importantly, how do you make sure the idea can survive without you? That's the journey we're about to follow. So here's how our story is going to unfold. We've got four key parts. We're going to kick things off with a fresh start in Corinth, and then watch a critical pivot in the mission. After that, we'll see a legal showdown that honestly changes everything. And finally, we'll see how the torch gets passed to make sure the movement has a future. Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story starts with Paul arriving in Corinth. Now, this isn't some quiet town. It's a huge Roman hub for commerce. He's just come from Athens, and he's basically starting from square one. In a city like this, your first move is absolutely critical. You've got to find a foothold, right? A place to stay, and people who might actually listen. But here's the thing. He doesn't start alone. He immediately connects with two people, Aquila and Priscilla. And what's really interesting is that their first bond wasn't just about their shared beliefs, it was about their shared job. They were all tent makers. This very practical connection gave Paul a place to live, a way to make a living, and his first crucial allies in a brand new city. So, with a home base set up, Paul rolls out his initial game plan. And it's pretty methodical, very focused. Every Sabbath, he heads to the local synagogue, which was the heart of the Jewish community, and he just reasons with people. He talks to both Jews and interested Greeks, trying to persuade them through debate and good old-fashioned discussion. Well, as you might guess, that direct approach ran into some serious trouble and fast. The existing leadership, they didn't really see a new perspective. They saw a threat. And this growing opposition forced Paul to make a really critical, game-changing decision. And here is that pivot. After getting all this pushback and rejection, Paul doesn't just, try the same thing harder. No, he completely changes his target audience. He literally walks out of the synagogue, sets up his operation right next door, and decides he's now going to focus on the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people. It was a massive shift in strategy. And you can just feel the finality in these words. This is not some subtle change of plans. It's a huge public statement. He is literally drawing a line in the sand, shaking the dust off, and declaring a completely new direction for his mission in Corinth. It's a total strategic realignment, born directly out of that conflict. So the big question is, did this risky move actually work? Well, the results were immediate and honestly pretty amazing. The leader of the very synagogue that just rejected him, a guy named Crispus, he converts along with his entire family. And a whole bunch of other Corinthians start listening and joining in. So what's wild is that the opposition didn't crush the idea. It actually forced it out into the open and gave it a much, much bigger audience. Now, even with this success, the danger was still very real. But right at this key moment, Paul has a vision that basically tells him he's on the right track. The message is simple. Don't be afraid. Keep talking. You have more friends in this city than you realize. This totally solidified his resolve, and it turned what could have been a short-term reaction into a real long-term strategy. And build is exactly what he does. We're not talking about a quick visit here. Paul commits a year and a half to Corinth, teaching and building this new community. This kind of long-term investment really shows you just how important that pivot and that vision truly were. As you can imagine, as the movement got bigger, so did the opposition. Eventually, his opponents decide they've had enough, and they escalate things from a religious debate to a legal fight. They actually drag Paul before the Roman proconsul, Gallio, which effectively puts the entire movement on trial. So here's how it goes down. They bring Paul before this Roman official, Gallio, and they accuse him of promoting an illegal religion. But just as Paul is about to give his defense, Gallio just cuts everyone off. It's a stunning moment. He refuses to even hear the case, calls it an internal religious squabble, and basically throws them all out of his court. Now, Gallio's statement here is a huge deal. He is essentially saying that as far as the Roman Empire is concerned, this new Christian movement is just a sect within Judaism, not some new illegal religion. By refusing to get involved, he accidentally sets a precedent that gives the movement crucial legal cover to keep operating and growing all across the empire. And just to underscore how little he cared, right after he dismisses them, the crowd turns and beats the new synagogue leader right there in front of him. And Gallio doesn't even blink. His total lack of concern sent a clear message: Rome is not going to police these internal disputes. And with that ruling, the legal threat against Paul and his followers was pretty much neutralized. So after this major win, and after spending more time building up the community, Paul eventually leaves Corinth. And this is where the story gets really, really interesting. It stops being about one man's mission and starts being about a self-sustaining community that can actually grow on its own. So the next chapter plays out all across the region. Paul leaves with his key partners, Priscilla and Aquila. But he makes a really smart strategic move. He leaves them in the major city of Ephesus to keep the work going there. And as he moves on, a new, super powerful speaker named Apollos shows up in Ephesus, which presents this young community with both a huge opportunity and a bit of a challenge. Think of Apollos as a bit of a rock star. The text says he's learned, he's passionate, he's a master of the scriptures. But he has a pretty significant gap in his knowledge. He knows the story of Jesus, but he doesn't have the full picture yet. He's this incredibly powerful asset, but he's an incomplete one. And this is where that community Paul left behind really proves its strength. So Priscilla and Aquila, remember them, the tent makers from back in Corinth? They hear Apollos speak, and they recognize both his incredible talent and his knowledge gap. So what do? They invite him over to their house, and they privately mentor him, filling in the missing pieces of his understanding. They invest in him. And the result of that mentorship is just incredible. The community in Ephesus doesn't just train Apollos, they deploy him. They send him off with their blessing to Achaia, the very region where Corinth is located, and he becomes a massive help there. A powerful public debater who strengthens the very community Paul founded. The movement is now creating its own leaders. And that brings us right to the core lesson here. The whole story starts with one leader, Paul, but it ends with the community that he built. A community that was able to identify, mentor, and then empower a new leader, Apollos. So the playbook seems pretty clear. Find practical allies, be ready to pivot when you face opposition, and most importantly, build a community that's strong enough to create its own future. Which really forces us to ask, what's more powerful in the long run? A single charismatic leader or a community that knows how to create them? That's something to think about.